Welcome to Your Personal Power Pod, a podcast about aligning yourself with the life you want. And here are your hosts, Sandy Abel and Shannon Young.
Hey, Shannon, another beautiful day. How are you today?
Things are good. How about you? Happy holiday season.
Yes, we had a lovely Thanksgiving. There's so much to be thankful for. I'm just grateful for every day, every hour of my life, and I'm thrilled that you're in it. That's just phenomenal. So many other wonderful things to be thankful for. And we had a nice Thanksgiving. So now we're moving into the other holiday season. The important thing about all these holiday seasons in my world is that they're about love and people that you care about and celebrating the joy and the good.
Yes.
You know, there's Christmas and Hanukkah and all those religions, but basically they're really about the joy and the love. I like this time of year because it's about joy and love.
Yeah, I do too. And I like the way our topic today, we're talking about forgiveness, which is huge and
Yes.
kind of tags on to our episode we did, which was on regret,
Right.
especially this time of year. If you want the love and the joy to be all encompassing in your life, then sometimes that means taking a look at some of the grudges or hostilities you're hanging on to and letting them go. And
Right.
forgiveness is a big part of that.
Yeah. If you want inner peace,
Yes.
you have to learn how to and utilize forgiveness.
So let's dig into it. What is forgiveness? Define it for us.
So forgiveness is a conscious and deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance towards a person or a group who you believe has harmed you. Also, about learning to forgive yourself if you feel that you have deliberately or inadvertently done something that hurts yourself or other people. At some point, you have to just forgive. And remember that everyone makes mistakes. It's about learning from your errors and letting go and moving on, because that's how you take care of your mental and physical well-being and your relationships.
Yeah, I think forgiveness is often mistaken as a gift or only a gift you give somebody else. That's not necessarily the case. There are people out there who may never be apologetic for the things they've done to you, but forgiving is about you and you.
Exactly.
If you hold on to anger and resentment and hurt, it just metastasizes inside you. And so being able to say, I forgive that person is really freeing yourself from being stuck.
Yes, it's a gift you give to you as well as the other person if they want to receive it. But if they don't, you can still do it internally and it will make a world of difference.
Yeah. So part of defining what forgiveness is being really clear about what it's not, because I think there is a tendency, because of the old saying, forgive and forget, to equate the two, and they don't necessarily go together. Forgiving does not necessarily mean forgetting.
Absolutely. Often it's not smart to forget. You have learned that somebody is dangerous. Don't forget that. Remember to stay away from them. You may forgive them for whatever they did, but you also have to not forget that they are dangerous and they're not in your life anymore. It's important to make sure you learn the lessons.
Yeah. Forgiving doesn't mean absolving the other person or yourself of responsibility. It just means I'm not going to hold this over your head anymore.
Yes, exactly. I'm going to let it go as much, if not more, for me than for you. I've learned from it and I'm going to realize this is who you are. Or on the other hand, realize you made a mistake and you're very sorry about it and you've apologized. So we can maybe move ahead. But each situation is very different and we have to pay attention to where we're coming from and where the other person is coming from and decide what we want to do about it.
Right. Just because you forgive somebody doesn't necessarily mean you need to move ahead with them in your life.
Yeah. And there are a lot of people that you don't. You realize what happened and you learn the lesson and you forgive them either verbally to them or internally with yourself, but then they're gone. You pretty much write them off because you've learned they're not safe in some way, not emotionally safe, not physically safe, not financially safe, whatever. They're not the kinds of people that you want to have in your life anymore, but you're not hauling around the grudge and the anger. And that's what can cause trouble for each of us if we hold on to that. I've known people who are still upset about something that happened years ago. Yes, it may have been awful, and whatever the other person did was just despicable. But who are you hurting by hanging on to this? You don't see them. They don't know what you're feeling or thinking. But every time you think of this person or the situation, you're hurting yourself. So forgiveness is more for each of us than for the other people.
I think sometimes when we're having a hard time forgiving, it's because we just simply haven't delved into it deep enough. It's easier to just be offended or be hurt or feel wronged than it is to like really sit and look at it and pay attention to what's going on with us, acknowledge what actually happened, acknowledge whatever our role might have been. That's not always the case. Obviously, if somebody
Right.
that you love gets hurt by somebody else or killed or, accidentally like damaged in
right.
some way, then maybe we had nothing to
Yeah.
do with it. But I think that the emotion needs to be felt and recognized before you can move on. And sometimes feeling those feelings is really scary. And so we just don't. It's easier to stay in that place of anger than it is to get past it and feel the hurt.
Yes. And after a while, it becomes a habit.
Yeah.
And then it becomes an uncomfortable comfort zone.
Right.
It's familiar, so it's comfortable, even though it's not a happy
Mhm.
place. We each need to look at what kinds of grudges and resentments and anger we're hauling around and find a way to resolve the situation so we can forgive and let it go. Let it go is like in big flashing letters.
How do we do that? What are the steps?
Well, first of all, you acknowledge what happened
Yeah.
and the hurt that it caused, and then consider how the hurt and pain has affected you. Get real clear on all that. Like you said, get clear on the situation. If you want to be really compassionate, look at what was going on with the other person. They may have been coming from what they thought was a positive place. They were doing what they thought was right, but it turned out to not be right for you.
Mhm.
And that will help you feel a little more willing to be forgiving. Then accept that it's the past. You cannot change the past. You can change how you think about it. You can change how you feel about it. But what happened, happened. You have to acknowledge that what's done is done. What do I want to do with it now? And then decide whether you want to forgive or not. And I hope whatever the situation is, you will forgive because you're letting yourself off the hook as well as the other person. Learn the lessons, whatever they may be. It may be to have more compassion for people in certain circumstances, or it may be that this person isn't trustworthy and I'll never have to deal with them again because I choose not to.
Mhm.
Whatever the lesson is, learn it and then implement it. Decide how you want to move ahead. You need a plan. You need to go, okay, now I've hauled this resentment and anger and grudge around for a couple of years and it's wearing me out and I'm really tired. I'm going to do this and forgive for me, and then forgive and let go. Let it go. There's those flashing letters.
That can be a process. When you got to step number 4, which was decide whether or not you'll forgive, I think you really need to be in a place where you're ready to do that. It's not something you can force. And if you're
Yes.
having trouble letting something go, it just says you're not looking at it enough. You haven't dealt with it enough. You haven't processed it enough. Don't beat yourself up if you're having trouble releasing something. It just means you haven't done all the work you need to do yet.
It takes time for you to sit and get clear with yourself. And also try to put yourself in the other person's shoes, see what they were thinking, what was going on with them at the time. Did they deliberately mean to cause you hurt or whatever they did? Were they just doing what they thought was best for them and you got hurt in the process? And once you come to that realization that they weren't out to get you, sometimes people are out to get you. And that's a whole different deal. But most of us, we have trouble with so-called friends or family members. They're not out to get us. They're doing whatever they need to do to defend their position. Like, good grief, these days, there's so much division among people who are supposedly close to each other about all kinds of things, politics and everything.
Philosophies.
Philosophies, that's the word, yes. Somehow we've lost the ability to just say, great, you believe that, I believe this. you're still my brother and I love you. So we're just going to not talk about this thing because I'm not going to convince you to change and you're not going to convince me to change. I still love you, so I'm not going to let this destroy us.
Mm-hmm.
And we've lost that. I don't understand. People need to forgive each other for having different philosophies, different points of views, as long as somebody's beliefs are not hurting physically or emotionally you. If it's just something they want to go believe, good grief, you don't need to protect yourself from that. That's their stuff.
Mm-hmm. That's a big part of it, is just allowing people to be who they are and to own their mistakes, giving them the space to do that and trusting that they will, even if they haven't and don't.
Exactly. Both people who are involved in the situation have to do that for each other for things to work out. If one person is like, okay, whatever, and the other person is, but no, you have to believe what I do. No, I'm going to let you go where you go, and I'm going to go where I go. I still love you. Hopefully, the other person will go, oh, okay, agree to disagree. I heard somewhere that the Supreme Court justices, these two disagreed on most things philosophically, and they were the best of friends
Mm-hmm.
because they liked each other, even though when they got in the courtroom, they voted on opposite sides of whatever the issue was most of the time. They didn't let that destroy their friendship. Forgiveness is huge in something like that happening.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a forgiveness story?
Well, our next step is about forgiving yourself. When we did our episode on regrets, I shared about how I regretted that I hadn't figured out how to send my books to the people who bought them, and I felt I let them down. I've had to learn to forgive myself for that. That was dumb on my part. I didn't learn the technology necessary to make that happen. I've learned the lesson that if anything involves technology, I will find a way to do it correctly. Then I have to go, I did what I could do at the time, and I forgive myself. Forgiving yourself is a really important and difficult thing for people.
Mm-hmm.
What about you, Shan? You have forgiveness stories?
There are so many lessons wrapped up in this one story. I had a boyfriend in high school who was not a particularly awesome boyfriend, and we dated for a really long time. And then when we finally broke up, I was carrying a lot of resentment. Throughout the years, I got over the relationship, but the story I was telling myself about him was pretty set in stone. And I don't think I realized how heavy that was until you ran into him a summer or two ago. And he said something to you about how he really appreciated you guys and our family because those years were some of the best of his life. And that was so jarring to me because they were not the best in my life. But what that did was it made me look at him completely differently. And finally, decades later, say, okay, if I look at the family he was coming from and the situations that were going on in his world at the time, he did the best he could do. And he actually wasn't awful. And that
Yeah.
was really, really big for me because it really underscored
Yeah.
how heavy this story I was telling myself about my teenage years and about his role in it, how heavy that whole thing was. Hearing his perspective, it was really a gift for me. It was a lightness. And it reminded me that he's human and I was human and I was culpable and he was struggling. And like, it just changed the story in this really gentle and yet explosive way
Powerful.
that allowed me to forgive both of us
Oh, that's wonderful.
when I didn't even know that was necessary.
That's beautiful. And it's wonderful because it's now something you don't have to haul around anymore.
Yeah, there's a lightness there. Lightness in terms of weight and lightness in terms of quality of light there.
Yes.
That used to just be a solid block about this story that I had about my teenage years.
Oh, well, I hope that you found some good in your teenage years. There were other things too.
Oh, no, absolutely. But the story about that one relationship, it was my very first romantic relationship. You carry those things with you and they affect how you move through the world.
They do.
I don't think I realized how I let that weight kind of skew my forward progress.
Oh, wow. Where are you now with it?
I'm better. It's still kind of in the supernova stage where I can still see the pieces disintegrating, but they're disintegrating and
great.
It's pretty awesome. Yeah.
And it's about forgiving him for being who he was
Mm-hmm.
and coming from where he came from to be who he was, and forgiving yourself for reacting the way you did and hauling it around all these years. Forgiveness is really powerful.
It is. It's really beautiful. And it's not about absolving you or the other person of responsibility. It's not about weakness. It's just about accepting that what happened, learning the lesson, feeling the feels, expressing remorse or apologizing if you need to, and just working your way through it so that you can put it behind you and let it go.
Yes, there's those flashing words again, letting it go.
Let it go.
Because when you let it go, then you can look ahead and look around where you are now and how wonderful it is. And if it's not, figure out how to make it wonderful. There's the personal power thing. That's a great story, Shan. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. Well, you lived through it too, so
I did.
I should apologize to you. Maybe that's why it hasn't completely gone away. I have not completely apologized to everybody who it affected.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's hard to be a teenager, especially in your first romantic relationship when you're 16, because you're learning about how it goes and you may not know what you really want. You just know what you have and try to make the best of it. I forgive you.
Thank you. Oh, that felt
Yay.
good.
Although there was no apology necessary to your dad and me. Forgiveness is really powerful stuff. I think a lot of people don't even realize that they're hauling things around. And if they are able to let them go and forgive, their life will be so much easier. And like you said, you won't be hauling that big rock around anymore.
Mm-hmm. So how is forgiving ourselves different from forgiving somebody else?
Well, it's pretty similar steps. You just understand your emotions and accept the responsibility for what happened if you did something, like you're forgiving yourself for hauling this around and just treating yourself with kindness and compassion. If you did something to hurt somebody else, you express your remorse. Apologize if you need to, make amends, apologize to yourself if you deliberately did something. If you inadvertently did something, you don't need to apologize to yourself. You were doing the best you could at the time with what you had. We all do that.
You can still apologize to yourself for not knowing better. For me, that's been really powerful. Just
Okay.
acknowledging, yeah, I made some really bad decisions. I didn't know.
Yes, right.
Forgiving myself is a whole lot easier as long as that's truthful. I don't want to fake it. We're all learning and growing at different stages in our progress. Most of us are just doing the very best we can, and we don't know.
Exactly.
When we know better, hopefully we do better.
Yes, that is the whole point. It's a process.
Yeah.
And it needs to move ahead. You can't be expected to do what you don't know needs to be done, or you don't know that you need to find out how to do it. You forgive yourself for your ignorance, but then you got to move on.
Yeah, you can't stay there.
No, you look for a way to learn from the experience, focus on making better choices in the future, and be gentle with yourself.
As always,
Yes, remember that forgiveness frees you and gives you peace.
you
Forgive.
deserve it.
Remember that forgiveness might be for somebody else, but it's always for you.
Lovely. That's lovely. Wrap us up.
Okay. When we feel wronged by someone, we often want to hold on to the pain, anger, and resentment. Maintaining these negative thoughts and feelings can harm your relationships and hurt you physically, mentally, and emotionally. And you always have the choice about how to deal with what happened. You start by understanding your thoughts and feelings and learn the lessons. You may or may not want to talk with the other person about what happened, but you always learn the lessons and decide how you want to move forward. It's also hugely important to forgive yourself if you've done something you feel is wrong. Accept responsibility for what happened. Treat yourself with understanding and apologize if that's necessary. Be sure to make better choices in the future and be gentle with yourself always.
Always, always.
Always,
Thank you,
always.
Sandy.
Thank you, Shannon. And thanks for sharing that great story. That was a wonderful example of forgiveness.
Well, thanks for helping me live through it as a teenager.
It's what we all do. We've all been teenagers.
Yes, true. And it wasn't very fun.
Yes, indeed.
We want to hear from you, whether it's your stories about how self-esteem and personal power affect your life, or if there are any topics you'd like us to address in future episodes, please let us know. We would also love if you wanted to review our podcast, and you can do that wherever you stream, or you can just visit yourpersonalpowerpod.com, click contact, and drop us an email. We're excited to let you know we are also on Instagram, where you can find us at yourpersonalpowerpod. And if you want to learn how coaching can change your life, Sandy would love to talk talk to you about it, you can reach out to her at sandy@insidejobscoach.com. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, find your power and change your life.